Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to a brand new episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for dailydead.com. Happy 2021, everybody. My name is Heather Wixson, and I am going to be one of your co-hosts for this episode. This week, we're going to be digging into some of our favorite movies from the last year. And for this week's episode, I am joined by Scott Drebit, Derek Anderson, and Bryan Christopher as we dig into some of the movies that left a lasting impact on all of us as we got through the dumpster fire that was 2020. Hello, gentlemen.
Howdy.
Hello.
Greetings.
Howdy indeed. So, I mean, I think the consensus is obviously 2020 was kind of a wash for a year in a lot of ways. But I will say, despite the fact that we had sort of a lull on theatrical outings in terms of genre movies, we still had a really good year for horror. So much that I'm still being tortured over trying to whittle down my favorites of 2020 list, unlike some of you high achievers who've already done yours and they're already up, and I'm definitely not feeling pressured. But it's been nice to sort of have those kind of distractions throughout what was a very tumultuous and unprecedented year. We're going to keep using the word unprecedented, which is going to be sort of being the catchphrase of 2020. It was nice to at least have something to sort of dive into for a little bit of a distraction. I don't know about you guys, but it was, I saw a lot of stuff and a lot of really good stuff. And it was really hard for me because usually when we do this, we pick two movies to kind of bring to the table. And I really struggled with what two movies to pick because there's a lot of good stuff out there.
See, I have a bit of a flip side of the coin to that, but only in the sense that my
Pop doesn't watch movies?
No, of course, Pop watches movies. I shouldn't say it's the flip. I shouldn't say it's the flip side of what you're saying, but I completely lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I think what
were we talking about?
Movies? We're talking about movies.
Yes, I know.
It was more of a year of not necessarily new movies, but comfort movies and old standbys. Because I think I was probably leaning more in that direction myself. I didn't see a ton of new stuff. I definitely saw some new stuff. And
yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at as well. Exactly what Bryan is saying. It was more of a comfort food year. And there was a case of availability, I think, with some of the movies that I wanted to see in that last year. And I'm sure some may be on lists or not. I don't know. But yeah, so it was a year where I didn't see a ton of new ones, but of the new ones I did see, many of them were exceptional.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking back to I didn't realize how many movies still came out this year because we got so used to movies being delayed and pushed back to 2021, understandably. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these movies that came out on Shudder and Amazon and just premium VOD. And I kind of like you guys, I was watching more like comfort food throughout the summer, and then this fall and winter, I was like, oh, holy crap, I have a lot to catch up on. So I'm still kind of in the process of that, but it's amazing how many movies still came out this year.
Yeah, it's if nothing else, the silver lining to 2020, I think, is that a lot more, I don't want to say mid-level because I feel like that's derogatory, but I feel like not having the theatrical movies pretty much from March through the end of the year, for the most part, really allowed a lot of these movies that generally get overlooked by a lot of genre fans to have the opportunity to be seen, to be talked about, to not just be sort of cast aside for the bigger titles. Because I guarantee had things been okay in 2020, right now we probably would be mostly talking about Candyman and Halloween Kills, and a few other movies that, bigger movies that were supposed to come out last year that we're waiting on for this year, Godzilla versus King Kong and stuff like that. So in some ways I'm sort of grateful in the fact that we can take away from this the concept of being able to take a moment and appreciate those movies, you know, that may not have $30 million budgets. They may not have the biggest studios behind them, but they're still valid entertainment that should be talked about, celebrated, and discussed. And I really appreciated the fact that we also saw, at least I saw a lot of people really embracing a lot of foreign horror movies, or movies that came from other countries that, you know, generally we don't get to talk about as much, like Indonesia, Australia, things like that. I think in a lot of ways that made me happy as a fan. Because I realize how lucky I am a lot of times to go to festivals and see these movies, and then they come out and they kind of get talked about a little bit, and then they sort of just, you know, everybody kind of gravitates to the bigger stuff. So if nothing else, like, you know, in most years I may not have had the chance to cover something like The Wretched, but I'm glad I did, because it was really great. It was really fun. And IFC Midnight did a really fantastic job with that movie in terms of, you know, promoting it and pushing it. And it became like a really big success. So, you know, if nothing else, at least that's the one silver lining I was able to take out of 2020. But it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, when everything was kind of falling, you know, the tumblers were locking as far as what direction 2020 was heading. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to be really busy this year. Okay. And that was not the case at all, because all of a sudden it was just like from like June until the end of the year, it was just like horror was coming out of the woodwork. But I, you know, as tired and as exhausted as I was at the end of the year, I was really grateful for that, because I think, again, it proved that, you know, even in the worst circumstances imaginable, I think we all need to take a moment to sort of have something that feeds our soul in a way. And I was grateful for having a lot of entertainment to be able to kind of get me through a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And, you know, that's exactly, sorry, just let me clear my throat. That's exactly right. It's getting us through. Right. And what you were saying about those mid-budget movies or those low-budget movies, technology has come so far now that a $4 million movie looks like $100 million movie when it's done right. You know, so it's very exciting in terms of storytelling. Is there isn't that stigma. If you level the playing field, there isn't that stigma of, well, it's low budget over here, it's high budget over there. The seams don't show as much. And I think that's absolutely terrific in terms of what we can look forward to.
By the way, when you just said, let me clear my throat, I thought you were going to bust out some DJ Cool on us.
Oh, no.
And now I'm sad.
Sorry to disappoint.
You tease.
I apologize.
I wish we could play music, because now I want to cut in, let me clear my throat now.
Yeah, I definitely think there was an element of horror, like going back to its roots over the last year, in terms of like, it's always been the genre of being creative with not a lot of resources. And so this past year was a chance to showcase that, and kind of remind people, you know, the really fun surprises of the year are usually the ones that don't have necessarily a lot of fanfare leading up to it, but ones that really surprise people and kind of get that word of mouth going after the fact, because they're just so good.
Yeah. And just hearing about all the movies, like the big budget movies coming out in 2021 that you listed, I'm all of a sudden really excited for the next year or two of cinema. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. It was amazing to see some of these movies that, I mean, we see so many horror movies released every year now, which is amazing. It's kind of like a good problem to have. But at the same time, it's hard for some of these movies and up and coming filmmakers to get the platform that they really deserve. And I feel like it almost allowed them the chance to have more eyes on their work. And so there's kind of a silver lining there. And it was kind of awesome to focus more on that. And we saw film festivals band together and find new ways to reach out to people. And I think more people that maybe couldn't go to some of these film festivals across the country or whatever it is for whatever reason, like they got to kind of see what it's like to watch some of these movies for the first time that are premiering at film festivals. And I think there was definitely some pros there, even as hard as this year was. It was cool to see horror still found a way.
Yeah, I will say, like, because the last festival that I had the chance to go to last year before everything kind of went sideways was Sundance. And Sundance has always been one of my favorites. There's a little bit of a prestige factor that comes with it, especially for years and years and years being told that I couldn't go to it because they wouldn't give me credentials. And so a few years I actually just was like, screw that, I'm going to go anyway. And I'll just figure out, I'll just buy tickets. So I'm really glad at least my last Sundance that I had was a really good one that I was very appreciative for. In fact, it's kind of funny because like, I remember thinking like last year as I was driving home, because I always drive back and forth. It's like my favorite drive to sort of do. And I just remember driving home and feeling like really good and really appreciative. I got to see some really good people while I was there that I don't always get to see at festivals. I really felt grounded there. Like I got a hang of like the scheduling and everything. I got a lot of stuff done. And I just felt really good after it. And then I was like, oh shoot, now this is like, that's done. And so now as I'm gearing up for Sundance 2021, which is all virtual, and, having to sort of relearn the ropes a little bit, I'm sort of a newbie again, even after like 6 years. I'm like, I'm sort of learning how to do this all over again. But I love the fact that people, because festivals they can be cost prohibitive. They can be time prohibitive for people who, have to work full-time jobs while they're doing this kind of stuff and have other obligations that don't make it easy for them to go and travel to these things. And I do hope that even after we quote unquote get back to normal, whatever that is and whenever that is, I do hope a lot of these festivals embrace continuing sort of the virtual experience for those who can't make it. Because I think there's something to be said for people being able to feel like they're part of that community from all over, and I will say the one weird thing to me was seeing people live tweeting festival screenings because that was a thing that came up over the summer. And I'm not a big fan of that, to be really honest. Because I could never in a million years, like one, if I'm watching something for work, my phone is away because that movie just deserves my utmost attention. Like I'm somebody, when I go into a festival, I turn my phone to silent. Like that phone doesn't exist. So to live tweet a new movie at a festival when you're supposed to be sort of celebrating it and focusing on it, like seems weird to me. I'm not passing judgment. Everybody does what they want to do. That's fine. But to me, like, I want to preserve that feeling of like watching a brand new movie for the very first time, and to sit there on my phone the whole time and tweet it. Like it feels distracting and it feels a little insulting, I think.
Yeah, I don't like it from either end. I don't like it from the end of, well, there's no way that I'm going to do this, right? Like I would never do this. That's insane. But then to watch someone else do it drives me crazy as well. Like,
yeah,
it's a no-win.
Like, if you're going to live tweet like an old movie, fine, that's cool. But like, and also I just feel like too, like I had to kind of watch myself because they were doing a lot of these viewing parties this year, like when certain movies would hit digital, like Invisible Man, Craft Legacy. And so they were encouraging people to do these tweet alongs, which I participated in a few of them, but in the back of my head, I had to be really conscientious of, I'm not going to tweet spoilers.
Yep.
And I wasn't going to tweet anything that could be like misconstrued. Like I had to be very deliberate about how I tweeted during those movies. Like I did Beetlejuice also, but everybody's seen Beetlejuice. So whatever, like, we'll talk about the dinner scene, whatever. We just don't talk about Jeffrey Jones is basically the rule on that one.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely fair. So, for me, like it's a catch-22 because you want to like sort of have that communal experience. But at the same time, like, I just want to watch the movies because I feel like that's like, quote unquote, my job. And maybe I take my job too seriously sometimes, which is definitely the case. But yeah, I saw that happen quite a bit, and it really kind of bummed me out because if I was a director and my movie was premiering at a festival and I knew all these people from all over the world were going to be watching it, like I'd want them to be focused solely on that for however long that movie was. So yeah, it was a weird sort of conundrum. Like it was one of these things that brings us together, but also you have to kind of sit back and figure out, well, what does that together mean? Because I think that's going to be a valid thing coming up throughout this year because, we already know Sundance and South by are both going to be virtual, which I'm guessing probably is going to carry over and into the fall too. In a best case scenario, unless the world's already ended and we're full blown apocalypse by then, who knows? Happy thoughts. So, but I think, I love the fact that, if nothing else, there are people who have never been able to attend Sundance because it's not cheap. It's not a cheap film festival to go to. Who maybe got overlooked in previous years, that they're going to get a chance to do that this year. And they get to be a part of it, and they get to feel like they're part of the Sundance community. And it's a good feeling because, I think if you've ever been to a film festival, there's just this really great sense of community that comes from it, whether you're sort of barely seeing people or seeing the same people over and over, or, whatever your experience is, you're still part of like this little community. So if nothing else, I'm glad that at least a lot of these organizations and festivals have been able to figure out a way to keep that community alive online.
Hear, hear.
Yes. So I guess we should go ahead and start jumping into some of these movies. You know what? We'll let Pop go first because I know he gets tired, and we don't want to wear him out too much.
Matt locks on in half an hour, so let's wrap this up.
Let me nudge him awake here.
Yeah. So Scott, if you're not too beat from your long day, would you want to talk about what's your first movie on your list?
My first movie is Scare Me.
Yes. Talking about Sundance.
That was a Sundancer?
It was. I had the distinct pleasure of getting to hang out with Josh Rubin and Aya Cash there. And it was super fun.
Man, oh man. I knew, other than reading your review of it, you did review it. Yes.
I like how you had to ask. Yes, I did.
Who are you?
Yeah, no, I know it. I know I read it anyway. But other than that, not knowing anything about it, it was easily the most pleasant surprise of the year for me. It's for those who don't know, Scare Me is the story of a successful horror writer and a not so successful horror writer. They don't know each other, but they both happen to have cabins in the woods for writing retreats, and they have a meet cute there, kind of, sort of, and they get together for the evening to swap stories, to try to scare each other. And it's a movie that completely disarmed me because it's like it's like Death Trap, but for a post-Scream audience, I guess, is maybe the best way I could describe it. It's this chamber room piece of two people plus one for a bit, the wonderful Chris Redd. And it's a great tribute to the art of storytelling, I think is what it is. And it's my favorite movie in a long time, where you could just close your eyes and listen to the dialogue, because the dialogue is so sharp and so witty. I'm like completely in love with this movie.
That makes me so happy. It's the only thing that I love more than movies about movies or movie making is movies about stories.
I'm sorry. I thought you said movies about boobies.
Those two. I love movies about boobies.
I was nodding along.
The Breastmaster was my favorite. Yeah, I really, really loved Scare Me. In fact, Scott, I almost want to send you Josh Rubin, who's a very, very kind soul. He actually sent me a copy of his script because he did those binded copies. They're beautiful. They're really great. But I actually read it over my winter break. And I don't generally get a chance to read scripts because I just don't usually have time. But because of how sharp that movie is with its dialogue and how it moves through and everything like that, I was like, okay, I really want to read this. And it's a fantastic read. And I think anybody who is an aspiring filmmaker would really benefit from taking a look at that script. And I almost want to send it to you now, but I know it probably won't get there till like April or May. But I know Josh is going to sell some more down the line. I think he said like when the movie comes out on Blu-ray and DVD, he's going to do a whole new batch of them.
All right, cool.
But for you or for anybody listening, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's a really fantastic script. It's a really great example of what like economical storytelling can do. And I don't mean like economical and like it's the basics. I mean like there's just no fat there. Like it just moves through. And like for me, it was a really fun movie. I think Aya Cash is fantastic, but I also don't think, as great as she is, I think Josh Rubin is also like really on the ball in that movie and just makes it a total blast. And of course, Chris Redd. So, and I keep forgetting the name of the lady who's the taxi or the Uber driver, but she's pretty fantastic as well.
She's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And it's funny you mentioned the screenplay. I don't think I've ever really had an interest in reading a screenplay. This sounds like it would be a fantastic read because it's so dialogue based, as you've talked about. And it surprised me quite a bit because like I read a little bit about it and I read the synopsis. And while the synopsis is accurate, the themes underneath and the story it's actually telling is a lot different than what you might expect. And it's primarily fun and it's primarily funny, but there are some kind of dark undertones. And again, they come from a place that you don't expect them to until the movie gets started and you kind of get that sense of where it's going. And I think it says a lot of really interesting things about kind of white male mediocrity and insecurity that I won't give too much away about, but I just thought it was done in such a clever way. And, I feel like it's interesting given that it was done by a white guy, the level of introspection that's going on in this movie is really interesting. And it's really smart and really fun. And I enjoy it quite a bit myself.
Derek, were you able to see it or?
I have not seen this one yet, but it is right up there on the top of the to watch list. So
come on, man.
I thought you said twatch list. Like, and I was like, oh, that's something the cul-de-sac gang does.
That's Twitch After Dark. Twatch.
Yeah, right. Twatch.
That's where there's a lot of movies about boobies on that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's where you can find the Breastmaster.
It's a whole new medium, but I am excited to watch this. This is definitely on my catch-up list. Even though we're in 2021, I feel like I have a nice little vacuum of time to catch up on this and a couple of others. So you've all convinced me to put it at number one.
All right. Well, there you go. Well, let's talk about a movie you have seen. What's the first movie on your list, Derek?
Yes. So I'm going to go with probably one of the more, I guess, talked about or viral movies of the year. And that is Host, which I did get a chance to check out. And holy crap. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Just reminded me of like a popcorn movie. It really just grabbed me the whole way through. And it felt like kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's like between Blair Witch Project and then Paranormal Activity and now Host. It just feels like every 10 years or so we get a movie that really takes command of like a new type of found footage element. And I feel like this is kind of the Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity of the 2020s. And I'm excited. I'm hoping that maybe we'll see another thing kind of like this in the next decade, that maybe we'll experiment more with Zoom type technology, but I just think they did a hell of a job with this. Obviously it was made during the COVID-19 lockdown, which is even more impressive. And the fact that the director, Rob Savage, had to have this like virtual workshop with his actors and tell them how to do like some of the practical effects in the movie with the slamming of the doors and all the stuff that the demonic presence is doing. I think that just shows like such a great level of ingenuity and perseverance in a time when a lot of us are probably feeling maybe a little more unmotivated, or just there's so much going on that it felt hard to really like get after it. And I just feel like the fact that they were able to pull this off in the toughest of times really is a testament in itself. And I just I loved it. I think it's one of those like jump scare kind of movies where, you know, it's more about the ride. You don't have to really necessarily like look for certain subtext or anything like that. But I think it really just nails kind of the way we were all feeling in lockdown, and then threw in a demon and saw what happened.
Yeah, it's probably the only movie I would actually recommend people watch on their computer, sort of for the optimal effects. Yeah, there's not a lot of movies I'd be like, oh, you really want to watch this on your computer. We watched it on our TV, but then I went back and rewatched it on my computer, and it was like really creepy that way, I think.
The net. Sorry.
Sandra
That would feel like even
here.
more. That would feel very meta too to watch it on a computer.
Yeah,
I think that's where I first saw it. And yeah, it heightened things, I think.
Yeah, because you're like, if you turn your lights off and you like, especially if you have like headphones on and like you're just sitting in a room by yourself, because like it almost makes you feel extra vulnerable in a way, because you have your headphones on, so you don't know what's going on behind you. You know, you're just really tuned into the screen. But yeah, I think that's one of the few movies that sort of, I think, benefits from a computer viewing space.
It makes you feel like immersed in it, like you're one of the people on this call.
Yeah.
So what's going on there could very well be going on behind you.
That's
Absolutely.
right. It's the same thing they did with the Unfriended franchise as well, and did well there as well. Yeah.
Also,
I'm really surprised. I was gonna say, I'm really surprised how Unfriended sort of has gotten overlooked a little bit over the last few years. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from Host, because Host definitely became sort of this, and I hate using like cliche words, but it became like sort of this zeitgeist movie in 2020, but for a good reason, because it's so damn good. But if you look at something like Unfriended or Searching, like those movies were sort of the predecessors to this in a lot of ways, and sort of set the table for them to come and sit down and have this big, glorious, meal. But yeah, although I think the second Unfriended is a little meaner, but
I love the second one.
Yeah, it kind of lost me there a little bit at the end, but I was pretty much on that ride for about 3/4 of that movie.
Yeah. Good enough.
Scott, I think Scott, you and I talked about this on an earlier episode this year, but petition for more 60-minute runtimes in 2021, please.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Anything that's under 90 minutes, like immediately, that's 3 stars in my book.
Whatever you did on screen, you didn't keep me here too long, so 3 stars.
But it is a bit of an anomaly, and it almost makes it more of an experiment, than a film, because you cut it down to 60 minutes, and you are cutting out some, where all your character beats are probably going to be, although they did, I thought, a good job of weaving those in. But, just from, as Derek said, the ingenuity on hand, to pull this off, and knowing, if you know a little bit about what went on to make this, it seems all that more impressive. But on top of that, he does pull off the scares effectively, and that's your bottom line, right? Like, it's just it's an hour roller coaster.
Yeah, and I know it's coming to Blu-ray too soon, and I think there's some like behind the scenes stuff on there, and I hope that there's just a whole like rundown of how they, step by step, how they made the movie and how the actors pulled off some of those effects. And I mean, that would almost be more interesting than some of, like, that's a movie in itself. So I would love to see that too.
20 years from now, we're going to get like a movie that's about the making of Host. Mark my words.
Mm-hmm. And for some reason, it's gonna be like 3.5 hours long.
Right.
Right.
It's gonna be
my gosh.
It's gonna be like a 2-part episodic movie on Netflix. For like 5 hours.
Yeah, CBS All Access.
Oh boy. All right.
Sounds like it.
Just another place I have to subscribe to so I can finish The Stand. Pardon me there. So Bryan, what's the first movie on your list?
So Derek and Heather, I think you'll join me in acknowledging that one of the highlights of 2020 was the return of aquatic horror.
You don't speak for me, mister. Okay. Jesus. Yes.
At least you got mentioned. So
who just spoke? Who was that? And I only say that, Scott, not to forget you again, but because Heather, Derek, and I did an aquatic horror episode, where we talked about how much we kind of love those aquatic B horror movies of the late 80s. And so we definitely got a big old taste of that in Underwater. But I think enough people have been talking about that in everybody's favorites list, including mine. I want to talk about one that's maybe a little less known and comes from Ireland, called Sea Fever. This one is by, and I hope I don't butcher her name too badly, Nisa Hardiman.
That is correct.
Great.
Yes.
This one is a little bit more subdued. It's a little bit more deliberate, but it's a very beautiful movie. It centers on a graduate student who gets a position on, she's kind of hitching a ride on a fishing trawler so that she can do some different experimental stuff for a school project she's working on as part of her graduate program. And she's already kind of starting behind the curve because she's a redhead, which is a big kind of supernatural no-no for fishing boats. And so she's also very socially awkward, and she's kind of got she's very intelligent but doesn't know how to act around other people. And
totally relatable.
Yeah, to pretty much everybody on this show and probably most of the people listening. And so they go out and they wind up kind of being confronted by this big bioluminescent sea creature that attaches to their boat. And the funny part is that's not really where the scares come from. It comes from the larvae that infect the boat and then start infecting the people on the boat. So it kind of shifts from this aquatic horror to something that's very prescient. It's kind of a quarantine story. And
I don't know her.
But it's very well done. It's very low key, and it's also very kind of melancholy and beautiful. And like I said, it is prescient for kind of everything we're going through with COVID. They talk about kind of some of the things you need to think about when you're talking about quarantining and why you quarantine. And it's just, I really enjoyed it. It was something that, it didn't it snuck up on me because I was watching it. I was like, it was fine. But as it was kind of closing out on the last credits, I was like, that was just really, really satisfying. And the way it ended was particularly kind of both bittersweet and beautiful. So it's definitely one that, if you like, seafaring horror, I think that's one you should definitely check out.
Yeah, a lot of it actually reminded me of a long lost X-Files episode.
Yeah, I can see that.
Where it's almost centered around if Scully is away from Mulder and she's investigating this thing on a boat and she's got to figure out how to deal with this whole scenario and things like that. There's definitely a lot about it that really made me pine for the olden days of the X-Files. But it's a fantastic movie. And I was really glad I had a chance to watch it because again, it was one of those. It's weird how a lot of movies that came out this year, because obviously they would have been made in 2019, ended up feeling as timely as they did. It was almost like a lot of these filmmakers were sort of on this precipice of where we were heading without even knowing it. And I do think Sea Fever is a really great example of how you can have something that reflects the experiences that we're going through, but does it in a thoughtful and I'm trying to think of the best word, and it's not coming to me because my brain is stupid.
There's a current of empathy that runs through it.
Yeah. And it's hard to make a movie where you almost have two sides pitted against each other, where you have these people who are on a boat who are trying to make a living, who are trying to, they're trying to survive the world as it is. And then you have a scientist who comes on here who sees that something is wrong and she's trying to make them understand what they need to do in order to kind of survive this. And it's just like these two ideals, which again, I don't know where we've seen any of that this year. P.S. wear a mask. But yeah, and I think the way that Hardman was able to sort of put these, like, just put it all together was really something special. And I enjoyed it immensely. And I'm really glad you brought it up, because again, I think it's one of those movies that came along, kind of got talked about, because I think they came out sort of early on in the lockdown here in the US. I think it was like March or April that it came out.
Would you say it made a small splash?
Oh, I would. Let's just put it this way. In my repertoire of interview questions, I know it was very early on in my, like, did you realize when you were making this, how timely this movie would end up being? Sort of, collection of interview questions, which then kept coming up more and more and more as the year went on. But yeah, it's a really, really fantastic creature feature that, again, feels like nothing else that came out last year also, which is interesting, especially in a year when Underwater came out. I'm really glad that you brought it up, because again, I think it's one of those movies that I really would love to see more people sort of discover. But I think at the time that it came out, it was right at the beginning of everything just starting to fall apart. And I think a lot of people were just trying to sort of recalibrate themselves a little bit. So, I think now that we've sort of recalibrated, it's a good time to go back and revisit it if you haven't seen
that. One is going on my list to see, and I still do not believe that Underwater came out last year.
Can I share my humiliating story about Underwater?
Please do.
Really quick. Okay. So last year they had a special screening for Underwater at the downtown Alamo Draft House. Back in the age when, we actually got to go see movies in the theater. And so they had a thing where, like, we were in the theater and then they did like a Q&A afterwards. And the director was there. Some of the cast was there, including Kristen Stewart, who is like the epitome of like the coolest person ever to walk the earth. Right. So, I'm in awe of her, and so I'm sitting there or whatever. And then after the Q&A finishes, they were having like a little party. And I was like, I don't do parties because I am zero fun. So we decided to leave. And so we go walking into the parking garage to go get in our really crappy car, because this is before the car accident. And so it's like our 2007 Honda Civic, who's like all dented up, scratches everywhere. Like, this car it was not it was our Civvy, but she was rounding the bend a little bit. And as we walk out there, literally Kristen Stewart and all of her super cool ass friends are literally standing 10 feet from our car. So now this old fuddy-duddy journalist lady has to get in her piece of shit car, where like Kristen Stewart and her super cool friends are waiting for their like driver to show up in like their big Escalade for the night. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to get in my car right now, because like the coolest human being on the planet is like standing right there. And like, excuse me while we back up and like, don't listen to the engine. It's fine. It's all fine. And it was like really weird and awkward. So
part of me was like, is this story going to end with Heather hitting Kristen Stewart with her car?
Oh my God, no way. Could you imagine? I'd be like one of the most hated people on the planet.
I think we would have known about that.
Yeah. I think that would have been a news story. But anyway, so it was like, it was super awkward for me and I felt really, really weird. So anyway, if you're listening, Kristen Stewart, because I'm sure you are, you did a great job in Underwater, and thanks for not laughing at my piece of shit car.
And she didn't go to the party either.
No, she did not. That's what the cool kids, the really cool kids don't go to the parties, is what I figured out. So
what you didn't know was that they all left at a 2006 Honda Civic.
Right. Well, there was like 10 of them, so I don't know if they would fit. Like I fit a lot of stuff in my car, but I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could fit like 8 people in that car.
No, you need an AMC Pacer with the hatchback. Yeah.
Oh, I miss those days.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was. I know. I can't even believe Underwater was like a year ago.
I saw that movie by myself and I was the only one in the theater.
Oh, me too. Yeah, that was the other thing. Like nobody went to see that movie. And this was before the pandemic.
and then do you love when everybody on Twitter is like, why didn't anybody say how great Underwater was? And I'm like, there's like a handful of us who are like, are you serious?
Go to hell? Yeah. Okay.
Like, come on. So yeah.
I think we shouted that one from the mountaintops. I don't know if anyone listened, but we did shout.
Yeah, it's one of those where I'm like, I'm sure a lot of people didn't want to go see it because of TJ Miller, but like, I don't know that this is a spoiler because, you know, it's a horror movie. People die, but like he has a really good death.
He does
That's
have a
really
good death.
satisfying. So if nothing else, watch it for that.
Does
And they
feel
even
good.
like un-TJ Millered him to a certain extent, or at least reined him in.
They did. Look, if I can still sit through the Deadpool movies, like you can make it through underwater. So that's all I'm saying. So, all right. Well, I'm going to jump into my first pick, which here we go. So who's that?
What?
Was that you, Pop Pop?
Huh?
Who?
He got confused.
Okay. So anyways, I'm going to pick a movie that also had a theatrical release last year, which doesn't even feel like it because it literally was in theaters for like a week and a half. And then the world went to crap. But I don't even know what to say about it anymore, but I'm bringing it up anyway. We're going to talk about The Invisible Man from Lee Winnell.
Not come out last year.
It really did. It really, really did. It came out in February of all. Yeah.
Didn't that come out in like the 1940s?
That Lee Winnell, he looks good for his age. He's like 97 years old, but he looks good. He looks real good. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about like really good studio horror that one really focuses on having a great story, but can also satisfy mainstream audience demand. So you have to kind of look at it from sort of like a business perspective in a way. The Invisible Man really hits all of that perfectly because it's a really smart take on this, you know, classic story from H.G. Wells. It's a really almost, I'm not using the word elevated, but there's a precision to the filmmaking that's on display in that movie that sort of supersedes a lot of the stuff that we saw last year. And it features one of the best performances of the year in Elizabeth Moss. And yet when you talk about sort of popcorn movies, it satisfies on that level too. Which is what you really want from studio movies. It's something I've been kind of studying a lot about, like in terms of, I was digging into like Point Break, and somebody was talking about how Catherine Bigelow is this really good auteur, like in terms of like bringing a thoughtfulness to mainstream filmmaking. And then there's a lot of parallels I can kind of see between somebody like Lee Winnell and Catherine Bigelow, where he makes stuff that's really good for us geeks, like that we can really sink our teeth into, you know, I'm going to pluralize teeth all of a sudden. But at the same time, it appeals to people who maybe don't necessarily have an interest in horror or they just want to go to a movie. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's what you want. Like you want, you know, we all want to feel precious about our genre because we love it so much and it means so much to us. But to me, really sort of the movies that sort of stand the test of time in horror are the ones that we can all talk about, but I can also have a conversation with my mom about, who knows nothing about like where horror movies are at today. And I think The Invisible Man does just that. And it's absolutely just phenomenal filmmaking from top to bottom, you know, between, you know, that opening sequence where she's getting out of the bed. Like, I don't think I took a breath for like 3.5 minutes. And a lot of that has to do with the cinematography from Stefan Duccio. I'm going to totally butcher that. I apologize. I'm sure he's listening. It's probably one of my favorite scores from Benjamin Wallfish. We are big Wallfish fanatics in this house. Bryan, a lot of times when he edits, he has to sort of put in temp scores. So he'll take stuff from other movies. And he uses Wallfish's scores a lot. But I love what he's done with Invisible Man. I think it's a really fantastic score. In fact, we were able to get the vinyl of it last year from Mondo, and it's incredible. Like I feel like I'm watching the movie again and about to have a panic attack because I know the restaurant scene's coming and holy shit. And when you talk about sort of those scenes, like those scenes that would define what the year of 2020 in horror is, for me, the number one scene is that restaurant scene in The Invisible Man. Like, I don't think it gets better than that because there is still that moment. And I still get goosebumps thinking about it because it was one of the last movies I got to see in a theater, like most people. And I just remember it's quiet, everybody's watching it. And then all of a sudden, as soon as everybody's eyes can start fixating on it, and I'm being very vague in case anybody hasn't seen it, collectively you start hearing people like gasping. And I remember hearing one guy go, "Oh shit." And it was like, it was just beautiful. Like, it was just how the realization of that moment came together. And then when it hits, it is just brutal. And it, to me, like that, if you want to encapsulate 2020 horror in one scene, that for me, it's that scene from Invisible Man.
But if it was going to be just like 2020 horror, it would happen, and it would happen again and again and again for like 9 months and then keep going.
Very true.
Damn, Lee Winnell is so good at crafting a horror movie and doing it on like an economic budget. He did the same thing, I think, with Upgrade, and made, a very modest budget look like 4 or 5 times more than that. He's doing very similar thing here, where it just looks like there's no seams in this, and it's a movie where it needs to come together the right way, because I think doing a horror movie based off The Invisible Man and diving into like themes of abuse and things like that is something that could have so easily gone very wrong if done in the wrong hands. I think it's interesting that I had to brace myself a little bit to watch this movie, because movies that kind of focus on abuse are very hard for me to get through, just because it can, like, if it's something that kind of dwells in the abuse, it's just very, nobody likes watching stuff like that. But it's something that, like, it's just one of those areas that, like, really is kind of trying to think of the
it's
right
a trigger
word.
point for you.
Yeah, but it's not like a trigger point, because it's not like bringing back any experiences. So I didn't want to say trigger, because it's not like bringing up anything for me, like there's no traumatic experience that it's bringing up for me, but it just makes me feel bad inside. And so if this kind of wallowed in that, it could have delved into being an unpleasant experience, but I think they balance well enough with making sure they're telling that story the right way, but also using classic horror beats to kind of bring that story out. And so it's certainly, I don't think fun is the right word, but like exciting. And it is, it's super well paced, and it draws out the suspense where it needs to, and it, works quickly where it needs to as well. And part of what I'm so excited for with this is that I think it's going to kick off the trend of the smaller budget, where unfortunately the Dark Universe didn't pan out. And I'm sorry, Heather, because I know you enjoyed The Mummy. But I'm excited to see where they're going to go, because I already know, I believe Karen Kusama is going to get the helm for doing a Dracula adaptation. So I'm really excited by that idea that, like, these are the kinds of things that we're going to see kind of popping up from the Universal monster stable.
Yeah. One thing that sort of bums me out a little bit is that when the movie finishes, and again, I'll be very vague, if by some chance you're listening to this and you didn't see Invisible Man, which I don't know that would be the case, but anyway, it does end in a way that, it could go on. This could be a story that carries on. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite movies from the original Invisible Man series has always been The Invisible Woman, because it's a little more lighthearted. It's a little more fun. It's got a little bit different. It's got a completely different feeling than a lot of the movies in that series. And for me, like, I love Elizabeth Moss, but this poor woman, her characters are always so put upon. Like, I want to see her do something fun. I want to see her do something that, like, allows her to sort of show off a different side of her. Because I know she's brilliant in the drama department, and I'm sure she would be brilliant, at anything she does. And I really was like, oh, the way that they sort of leave it, like, you could totally parlay this right into take on the Invisible Woman, because that is basically, it's sort of the same idea, where it's like this woman who was sort of like a model, and she was kind of being demeaned by all the men in her life. And then she ends up taking this potion that turns her invisible, and she gets to become really proactive and, like, help solve these crimes and things like that. And I was like, well, that's perfect. The only bummer to that is not bummer because I shouldn't say that, but I know Elizabeth Banks a few years ago announced that she was going to be doing an Invisible Woman movie, which kind of takes that possibility away a little bit. So I don't know. It's like, how do we get these things to come together? Because I don't want to take anything away from Elizabeth Banks because I want her to be out there directing. Yeah. But I want to see Elizabeth Moss get to do this, but have some fun with it now.
So if you want her to have fun with it, Elizabeth Moss is the invisible lady in Paris. She goes on adventures. Maybe she foils a bank robbery. She gets mixed up with some bank robbers in her invisible suit. She falls in love with someone.
What would be the perfect thing for an invisible woman to fall in love with? Like, because you have to have like the yin and the yang there. So I'm trying to think of like, what's the perfect thing for her to fall in love with? Or maybe she don't need no man.
No. That's why I stopped at said someone, or maybe no one.
Yeah.
Or maybe no one.
Maybe she just comes out of it realizing that the love that she really needed deep down was within her all along.
That's right.
So profound, I know. So anyway, but yeah, I was just, when you talk about 2020 horror, it's hard to not include The Invisible Man. So that's why I picked that one. It was one of the obvious ones. So I was like, well, whatever. I'll be Captain Obvious for this episode.
Yeah, but you know what? That's another. Yeah, because that one I forgot it to put it on my list. Because I'm like that. No, that was a 1998 movie.
That was Hollow Man.
Starring Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
Right.
There was no Invisible Man movie that came out last year.
And
forget.
I'm really glad we got to actually see that in the theater before everything happened with COVID, because it was so, like you were mentioning, like the reactions of the crowd. And that was such a fun movie to see with an audience and listen to the reactions to like, there's so many scenes in that movie that are like, that's the scene. And then he one-ups it. But the restaurant scene, hands down, is definitely like, that was like, take your hand and just clamp it over your mouth, kind of like shocker scene. That is just such a classic, like lights out kind of moment that was so fun to watch in a theater.
So as a brief intermission question before we get into kind of like going into our second round of movies.
Taking a sidebar?
Oh, I am totally.
All right.
I'm wondering, do you all remember what the last movie you saw in the theater was?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was The Invisible Man.
Invisible Man for Scott?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, obviously drive-ins don't count. So, but yeah, mine was actually, because I'm a jerk, A Quiet Place 2.
Why does that make you a jerk?
Because y'all still have to wait. Y'all still have to wait like 4 months on that movie.
It hasn't come out yet, Bryan.
All I'm saying is I'm really glad I worked on that review on my way home from New York, because that movie feels like 10 years ago too. Like
it's a 2024 release.
Like they flew us to New York at the beginning of a pandemic. I went to New York for that movie. That's crazy to me. Wow. Yeah. I brought lots of wet wipes so I could wipe everything down, and it was something. But that was when we were also kind of like, oh, we probably shouldn't touch each other. So we were like giving, like, I did the Office across the room high five with John Krasinski. So that was fun.
Nice.
So, and I was his first interview of the day. So all I'm saying is if he continued to do that all day, that was on me because I started it. So, but yeah, that was my last one. I think the one before that was The Hunt.
Mine was, it almost was The Invisible Man, but I think the next one I saw and the last one in theaters was Extraordinary. And it was playing. Yeah. And I really liked it. It's actually one of my favorites of 2020. It was so much fun. It was like this quirky, kind of felt like it came from the Edgar Wright universe, very like quirky British humor. And yeah, it was really, really fun. And I saw that they actually finally put a Alamo Drafthouse in Minnesota. So it's a bit of a drive, but my friend Zach and I, who I've been seeing movies with for like decades, we went and saw it. And it was kind of that weird gray area too, where like COVID was kind of becoming a thing, but we didn't really know like how serious it was. And it was like when the waiter came to like give us our food, it was kind of like, I feel like we're kind of not supposed to be this close to each other, like in the same room. But so it was a kind of a weird vibe, but we still really enjoyed the movie. And then things really picked up from there and never stepped in a theater since.
I mean, if you're going to see that, you just really can't go anywhere after that. Like, you know, I didn't get to see that because I know it did like the festival run and I totally missed it, which bums me out. So
I would definitely recommend it. I think it's out now. I think it's streamable. But I would, whenever it does become available, I would definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and Will Forte plays a really bizarre but interesting villain in it. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. So highly recommended.
Playing a bizarre character? Get out.
Yeah, I know. So against type.
What was yours, Bryan? Did you say?
Mine was, it wasn't a new movie, but I think it was a very memorable one. I got to actually see Friday the 13th Part 3 with a full 3D glasses experience, which was pretty cool way to end out my movie theater experience for the year, or however long it winds up being. And it was kind of interesting too, because the glasses we had to wear were almost like these giant, like, they looked like alien goggles of some kind, because they needed to reproduce like the type of
the red and blue.
Not even not even the red and green. Like they were using a process that reproduced like when they talk about the silver screen, that was actually a literal thing. Screens had like a layer of silver on them, and that actually had something to do with the 3D component. And so they needed to find a way, because all the screens are like digital now, so they don't bother with that silver layer. They needed to recreate some element of that with the glasses themselves. So they were just these huge, it was as big as my head, and it worked really well. It was the first time I'd actually seen, because I had the DVD with the crappy like red and blue cardboard glasses, and that was whatever. But this, like seeing it in the actual 3D was a pretty amazing experience.
That's awesome. Kids, we're educational here as well.
I'm just glad you got to see Dana Kimmel do her speeches in that movie, because they're so riveting.
Yes.
I just want to get to know this place again. I want to get to know you again. Yeah, she's something in that movie. I still love her though.
While Rick is trying to hump her leg.
Oh man, there's so much chemistry between them in that movie. It's like watching like the Thornbirds or something, but like the unsexy version.
The Thornbirds.
Big shout out to Exhumed Films for hosting that viewing.
That's awesome.
Hold on.
That's really cool.
Can I stop for a second? How do I get called out as Pop when she's thrown out Thornbirds references?
Because my mom watched the Thornbirds, not me. I grew up in the era where like whatever your parents watched on TV, you watched on TV.
So you watched the Thornbirds.
Of course I watched the Thornbirds. Get out of here. I watch Dallas every week. Come on now.
For a second there, I was like, wait, wild thornberries? No.
Yes.
Sweet Jesus.
I'm now Pop.
Yeah.
He's on a Nickelodeon run tonight.
He is. Yeah, I think people used to call them like the wannabe Rugrats, but then I think they kind of grew on people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they grew on people, but yeah, I think when they first came out, everyone's like, "Oh, it's kind of like Rugrats." So, all right, so let's dive into our second choices. Scott, again, I don't want to keep you up too long past bedtime here, so we'll let you go first.
It's too late for that. Let's keep going. My second choice, and I guess it's a bit of a theme, but the two that I've picked this evening are, well, this one is an anthology film. Scare Me is not an anthology film, but it discusses it. Anyway, my second pick is The Mortuary Collection, written and directed by Ryan Spindell. And again, this is one of those ones, it popped up on Shudder and said it was a new anthology. Clancy Brown is playing our evil host, Montgomery Dark. and let's go. And the thing turned out to be one of the most pleasant surprises of the year. Solid stories, really great technical values, and Clancy Brown gives a fantastic performance. Bryan has mentioned before that it's he's a little reminiscent of Angus Scrimm as the tall man, and that's certainly in there. And the practical effects are fantastic in it. It has got some really great gross out gags. Yeah, it was just one of the most pleasant surprises of the year for me. And, it's been really great in the past 10 years or so, I think, to see anthology movies come back in the way that they have.
And I will say that I am usually lukewarm on anthology movies, just because odds are there's going to be one or two segments that I'm not going to enjoy. But in this case, and Scott, you've explained this, kind of having that singularity of tone and vision by having one person in charge of the whole thing, as opposed to having different people, different directors submit different segments. I think, Spindell was able to really kind of hone in on what kind of an attitude and kind of what kind of tone he wanted this movie to be. And because that connected with me, then I enjoyed it the whole way through. It's going to be one of those things where I think if you're not liking this movie within the first or maybe the second vignette, you're probably not going to like any of it, because I think it's, it's not repetitive, but it's the same feel throughout. And so if you like it, you're really going to like it. If not, then, if you're hoping for that surprise of the anthology at the end, you might not get that. But I will say the wraparound reveal is one of the better ones that I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah.
So this is a funny one for me. Because most people don't know that I actually have a little history with the Mortuary Collection.
Do tell.
Yes. So back in my days when I was at Dread Central, which was a real thing that happened before all of my work got erased there. Sorry. Was I not supposed to say that? Oops. Anyway, so I did this contest because I really wanted to start giving people a chance to do stuff with short films, because I realized how much of a door opener they could be. So I did this little contest for short film scripts, and whoever won, I put together I think $500 or whatever it was. And one of the scripts that came in for that was the Babysitter script from Ryan Spindell. And it ended up winning. And we had a really good meeting, and actually had decided to work together on the Mortuary Collection. And he took it in a different direction. And I'm not honestly, because I know how hard he worked on this movie. I know how long he worked on this movie, because these were things that we were meeting about in 2010. So for all of you folks out there who get frustrated because your movie doesn't get made in a year or two, filmmaking is a marathon, because we were having meetings about Mortuary Collection in 2010. But I will tell you, the one thing that made me really happy was that one of the two actors that Ryan had talked about very early on, for the character of the mortician, one of them was Clancy Brown. So it's the fact that he was able to get Clancy to do this movie was really cool, because I knew that was one of the two people. I think the other one was Tim Curry. And then for obvious reasons, you know. So anyway, so it was really cool, but it was one of those where I was like, oh, because it was something we put some time and effort and money into. And then he kind of just took it in a different direction, which is fine. I don't begrudge him anything. This is all water under the bridge, but it is weird because it's I have the script from the original stuff, and there's a lot of similarities. But that script was tight. And then when I read that script for The Babysitter, I just knew that this kid had something really, really special in him. And it's good to see that he was able to do that. But it felt weird. I covered it when I did Fantastic Fest, I did interviews, but it felt weird to review it or sort of keep cutting.
Sure.
Like it feels a little too close and,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But I'm glad you mentioned it because it really is hard to pull off good anthologies. And it's even more harder to, as you mentioned, to pull off good anthologies with different directors. And I think Scare Package gets really darn close. I think more often than not, those segments worked for me. I think there's like one of them, maybe two that I'm kind of not super crazy about, but I didn't dislike them. But there is a cohesiveness to Mortuary Collection that really works in the favor of the type of story that Ryan's telling there and sort of the aesthetics and this sort of world that he's building. But yeah, but it's one of those kids, like if you're out there and you want to make a movie and you're frustrated after year one because you haven't made it yet, guess what? Buckle in because it's not going to be easy generally. And sometimes, and in the meantime, while Ryan was still trying to get Mortuary Collection going, like he was out there still making other short films and trying to prove to people that he could do this. So if you want somebody who can be a real testament to the endurance of an independent filmmaker, I would definitely say it's in Ryan.
And hell, even after you've made the movie, there still might be more to that race to go. Because just remember that Underwater was shot, 2017?
Yeah. So you just never know what the business is how the business is gonna treat you and where they're gonna put your projects and things like that. So
That's right. Sometimes you have to wait a few years to flop.
Yep. And then have people in retrospect going, why didn't I go see this in theaters?
I know. Yeah.
Because Bite Me, that's why.
All right. Well, Bryan, what's your next movie?
Well, speaking of Bite.
Yes. I figured that'd be a good segue.
Hey-o, yeah. I am going with Brad Michael Elmore's Bit. This was, I would say, pretty independent, just kind of a fairly small release. And it is very much in the spirit of Derek and mine's favorite vampire movie, The Lost Boys. It's a lot of fun. And it also, it's one of those things where I always feel a little bit bad about kind of relating it to The Lost Boys because I don't want to say it's like a carbon copy or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's very much its own thing. And it's very interesting because it features a teenage transgender girl who moves to LA from like a small California town. And like almost immediately she gets embroiled in this pack of women vampires. And their only rule is that you can't turn men. And
it's so weird, like, because I never saw this movie, but it sounds exactly like what happened to me when I moved to LA. That's so crazy.
Well, the lead character's name is Heather, so I think that
Get out. Is it really?
No, it's Laurel.
Oh, okay. I was like, holy shit, that's crazy.
I was like, wait a minute.
But it's a movie that is it's so great because it's representation without having to make the representation like
a plot point.
Yeah. Or it doesn't need to like dwell on the plot point. And it kind of aggravates me because I was looking at on the Wikipedia page, there was a Variety review where it says it flirts with various identification points, trans, lesbian, feminist, without making much of them beyond the automatic cred that placing an LGBTQ stamp on the genre tropes will mean for some viewers. And that aggravates me because it's like not all LGBTQ movies have to be like misery porn. It doesn't need to be about the travails about being transgender, the travails about being LGBTQ in general. They're, I think, significant elements, but it's also it's a fun movie, and you can make a fun movie about women and about sexuality and about gender and still just have it be like a romp. It doesn't need to be like an A24, like we're going for awards or something like that. It can just be fun. And that's what this movie is. But it also treats the topics it's covering with respect. And so it's bloody, it's slick, it's fast paced, and it's one of those things where the only, for me, drawback to it was that they did such a great job at world building that I felt like when it was over, I wanted more. So this is something that I would love to see like turned into a TV series or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this was. I remember we had talked about this, and I know like you mentioned the Lost Boys, and I know Joel Schumacher had at one point kind of suggested that if they ever did a sequel to the Lost Boys, they should do like the Lost Girls. And I think like you had mentioned, this is maybe the closest we'll ever get to that. And it feels, but it's also not a carbon copy. It just feels like the same spirit of fun and danger and like just a really cool, badass vampire movie. And everything about it, I 100% agree. I think it's definitely one of my favorites of the year too. And just the representation is amazing. But like you said, it's the way it goes about it is really, really cool. And, the main character, she has supportive parents. She's very confident and she's kicking ass, and like just the whole thing about it is so refreshing. And I just love the story of it is so great. I feel like there's even like a little bit of What We Do in the Shadows, like quirkiness in there mixed in with kind of the Lost Boys elements, especially with some of like the flashback scenes when you go back to the 70s. And it just feels like a much bigger movie than it is, probably budget wise too. So I was really impressed with this. It screened at Popcorn Frights, and it also co-stars James Paxton, the son of Bill Paxton, who is really good in it as well. And I definitely would encourage anyone to check it out. It's a lot of fun.
The biggest compliment I can pay it is that it really does have the spirit of Joel Schumacher in it.
So I have to wonder, because like I literally get hundreds of emails every month about movies coming out, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't know how this movie came and went, and I had no idea about it. Because I just saw a couple of people talking about it like the last few months. And I follow Brad on Twitter, so I've been wanting to catch up on it and stuff like that. But I literally, like, when everybody started talking about it, I went through my emails. I received nothing on this movie.
Yeah, whoever distributed it, Vertical Entertainment, gang, you dropped the ball when it came to marketing this movie, because you had something special there, and you should have given it more of a push. I feel very lucky to have stumbled upon hearing about it. But yeah, the word I got about it was that there just wasn't pushed, and it didn't get any kind of really good marketing. I think the only way that we heard about it was word of mouth. I think the way I heard about it was Harmony Colangelo from the This Ends at Prom podcast did a really good post about it. I actually linked to it in my favorites list. So if you want to read it, it's just a really good rundown of kind of what makes it really good transgender representation. And it's, I was lucky to have stumbled on that. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have known anything about it either.
That raises a good question about marketing in a COVID world.
Well, that's what's weird to me, is because like I get a lot of the like October Coast and Vertical and like Uncorked and Gravitas emails. And I seriously went through and I looked up Bit Movie Vertical, because I figured one of those words has got to hit. I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing. But I get all kinds of stuff from them. So like, why didn't they push this movie? I'm angry about it now. But now it is definitely on my watch list.
Yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it. And it's on Amazon Prime Video right now.
Yeah.
It does cost some money to rent, but hopefully, one day maybe it can get to Shudder or some horror platform where it can really like get the spotlight it deserves. Because I do feel like it's probably one of the most it just feels like it did not get the word of mouth that especially in a COVID environment where people were watching a lot of movies. Like, I feel like this really could have flourished more than it did.
Yeah, I really wish Brad would have reached out to me when it happened, because I would have definitely, because that's what I do. So Jesus. Anyway, I don't know what this money is that you speak of, but I will find the movie. I'll wait till I get some Amazon credits, but yeah, no, it definitely sounds like a lot of fun. And it sounds like it'd be something totally in my wheelhouse. So that's exciting. I just, because I remember I saw, I think Jerry Smith was talking about it as well online, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, it's funny because you know how stupid Twitter can be. Like, if you click on somebody's Twitter profile, like then suddenly you just see like that person over and over again in the algorithm. And like, I hadn't seen any tweets from Brad, even though we'd followed each other for a while. I hadn't seen any of his tweets like in over a year. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, you put out a movie? I was like, holy shit, dude. So, you know, I encourage people, like my DMs are a mess. Like I probably have like over 300 unread in there. So if I don't catch it, and again, I don't get notifications on my phone. So if I don't catch it while I'm actually on Twitter, like chances are it's going to be a while till I see it. But I always encourage people, if you've got like a movie coming out, like, and you need that kind of a thing, like please reach out, like, or just poke me on Twitter and be like, you dumb bitch, like check your DMs, just something. So I know to keep an eye out for this, because like films like that, like I want to make a place for. I think that's important.
Now I'm going to be like following Heather's timeline to see how long it takes before like someone tags her, hey, you dumb bitch, look at your DMs.
Do it. I don't care. I have zero ego. So chances are you're probably right. So, but yeah, I just, you know, it's one of those, like, it makes me realize, and it's something I've been really toying with, is like, it makes me realize the importance of this thing that I used to do called Indie Horror Month, which was this big initiative that I used to do again over at my previous site, where I would spend a whole month celebrating independent film. Like, it's weird now because now we're sort of 7 to 10 years removed from what I was doing then, because the business has changed so much. So it's almost even hard to determine what is really an independent movie. But it definitely shows for as much as, and I think we do a really good job of it on Daily Dead in terms of spotlighting a lot of movies that often get overlooked by other sites. It still shows that there's work to be done because we're still missing movies here and there. But it also proves that it's just impossible for us to cover everything. So I don't know. Do I become a masochist and bring back Indie Horror Month this year? I don't know. Stay tuned, kids. Let's find out. Because I will lose my mind, but you know, that's what I do. So anyway, Derek, why don't you put us back on track and tell us what your next movie is?
Okay, a movie you might have heard of in 2020 here, Freaky, from Christopher Landon, which he co-wrote with Michael Kennedy. This, you know, Christopher Landon is one of those filmmakers, probably the number one filmmaker over the last 5 to 8 years, where I just am the most excited to see as a horror filmmaker what he puts out next. I just have never been disappointed by anything he put out. I feel like he truly is a master at combining horror and comedy and self-aware and social commentary. And he just somehow always pulls it off. Like, I've never felt like I haven't been fully satisfied by any of his films. Even going back to like Disturbia, which I know he wrote the script for that. Like, it just feels like he knows exactly what he's doing. And this is certainly no exception. It felt like, I know we're all waiting for the next Happy Death Day movie, but this is as close as we're going to get for now. Hopefully one day we will get to see the continued adventures of Tree. But for now we get Freaky, and it's so awesome. And I'm so glad that we got to see this. Even with COVID, we got to kind of get this premium VOD release for it. If you're not familiar, it follows the kind of like a Freaky Friday send up, where, except it's instead of Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan as that's the version I'm most familiar with. We have Vince Vaughn as a serial killer and Catherine Newton as a high school student who switched places after she's stabbed with this ancient dagger. And it is so much fun. I actually just watched this the other night, and I really had been looking forward to catching up on it, and it was worth every penny of the like premium VOD price. I wish, you know, if we were in a safe world right now, to see it in theaters with an audience would have been a lot of fun, or to go to the drive-in and see it would have been a lot of fun. But man, he just continually finds a way to make like the most fun horror movies that still like have really high stakes, like the drama's great. The representation is amazing. The casting is phenomenal. Like, and then Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton just getting to play like two different characters. It was just such a blast. And I was almost sad to see, like, I didn't want it to end. Like, I wanted Vince Vaughn to like continue playing like his version of a teenage girl. And I wanted to see Catherine Newton as this serial killer. Like, I didn't want that to be resolved in any way because they were both so good at it. But I just cannot believe
it was resolved then? Is that what you're saying? I haven't seen it.
No, I'm not saying it's resolved, Scott. I'm just saying maybe it never was. And I was just rambling. But yeah, the takeaway is that it was amazing.
Scott, really quick, which version of Freaky Friday are you most familiar with?
Probably the Jamie Lee Curtis one.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I saw
the 76 one, right?
Sure.
Was that what's her face?
That's with Jodie Foster, and Barbara Harris. It's weird.
It is weird, right?
It's a weird movie. The original one is strange, but I like all the Freaky Friday variations, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing Freaky. I've heard nothing but wonderful things.
Yeah, Freaky was really great. I'm right there with you, Derek, in terms of Christopher Landon. It still makes me angry how much people slept on Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse because it had such a crazy name, or because it looked too teen-centric. Like, you all just don't know. Because zombie kitties are the best thing ever to come out in modern horror, and you all missed it. So just,
I can second that. I didn't miss it. It was quite good.
Right? Like, it was super duper fun, raunchy, really like great paced. I was a big fan of that movie.
Cloris Leachman.
Right? Like, it's really, really good. And it just makes me sad that people just kind of like dismissed it. And at least some people caught up in it once they saw Happy Death Day, and they were like, oh, this guy's kind of good. Hindsight's always 20/20. I guess for me, like, I love Christopher Landon doing horror comedy. But I also think his entry in the paranormal universe, the Marked Ones, is kind of one of my favorite sequels because it has a little bit of humor to it, but not in like that ha-ha funny way, in that, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. I can't help myself from laughing because it involves like the Brujas in the neighborhood and things like that. And like, you're just laughing because you're like, oh my God, they're so screwed right now. Or the scene where the Chihuahua is levitating and you're like, oh my God. You're like, oh God, that dog is in trouble. But yeah, I just think everybody talks about like horror comedies like they're easy. And I don't think they're easy. I think they're actually one of the hardest things to pull off successfully. And I think, and for my money, I think in terms of the master of horror comedies, at least in modern times, I think Christopher Landon is a really good successor to somebody like Joe Dante. And I think the more that we see from him, the more we're going to come to realize that. But I'm just staking claim on that now. I mean, I guess I sort of staked claim on it back during Happy Death Day. But I think for me, when you talk about somebody who's able to sort of blend these two genres together and really make them work in service with each other, Christopher Landon is the guy. And it's sort of embarrassing how much I kind of fangirl out around his movies. So I feel sort of guilty when I have to talk to him or interview him, because I feel like I'm like, oh my God, remember that? I'm like, I turn into Chris Farley when he's interviewing Paul McCartney.
Remember when?
Yeah, pretty much. That's literally me. But I think there's just something really fantastic about what he's able to do with sort of those genres and bringing them together. And I think in general, I think horror comedies don't get nearly the respect that they deserve. Like, we all appreciate them and we all enjoy a good laugh and a scare, but I think there's and again, I think something like Scare Me proves, like, you really have to have that perfect balance where everything feels like it's working together and not working against each other. And I think that's something Landon has gotten more right than wrong throughout his career so far. All right.
Yeah, absolute ditto.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. So Brian, are we on you now? I don't even remember.
No, we did me.
Oh my God. I don't know.
I think we're back around to you at this point.
Oh, Jesus. I don't know anymore. Like, when we talk about movies. Oh boy. As you can tell, I'm having a really good mental week over here. Okay. So my second choice movie, I don't know. it sort of kind of came out for most people like at the end of last year, and then it came out Blu-ray and DVD. So I'm not sure how many of you guys have like sort of caught up with it yet. But I am going with Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor. It's a movie, again, speaking of Sundance, I knew immediately when I saw it that it was going to be probably the most audacious movie to come out in 2020. And I was correct. It's been a pure joy for me to see people reacting to it. I think beyond the fact that it's insightful, exciting, thrilling, visceral, guttural filmmaking at its very best. It has a lot to say about identity. And I do think it's probably one of the most sort of thought-provoking movies to have come out during 2020. I think it's definitely Cronenberg's best work, Brandon Cronenberg's best work. And I see a lot of people sort of immediately making these connections between Brandon and obviously his dad's work. But I think what I like about Possessor is that even though there could definitely be some through lines, made from Possessor to some of David Cronenberg's works, this movie for me really solidifies Brandon as a singular talent, as somebody out there taking risks with stories in ways we haven't seen before, and really just pushing the envelope. And again, when you talk about moments in horror of 2020 that really just like punch you right in the face while you're watching it. I mean, this movie's full of them. I can't even pick one because between the opening and then there's a certain scene with Sean Bean in the movie. The movie kind of dismantles you emotionally as you're watching it. And then when you're done, you literally have to figure out how to put the pieces back in. And being able to sort of re-experience it again a couple weeks ago with the Blu-ray release was a real joy because it was just everything still works so incredibly well for me on that movie. And actually, I loved it even more the second time because there's just a lot of small things in that movie that sort of zip by you that first time that really settled in and really shows you what that movie is really about. And I think I'm probably the wrong person to talk about this stuff, but there's a lot of it sort of floats the themes of like dysphoria and gender dysphoria and things like that in a very thought-provoking way that I think I would love to see more people sort of dive into and talk about in ways that I know I am not equipped to do.
I really, really did enjoy this movie. I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5. I will admit that I'm probably one in the crowd who I think the thing that kept it from pushing over the top and being like one that I absolutely loved was that I couldn't get over the sense that I was watching Brandon Cronenberg do a David Cronenberg movie. I think that, and not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I love David Cronenberg movies and I really enjoyed this movie. I don't know. It was just, I couldn't get over that idea that like there wasn't enough separation for me in terms of like style to, and I know this is, purely, it's subjective and just opinion, but I couldn't quite get over that hump. That being said, I loved Andrea Riseborough in it. I did love like all the visuals and the effects were fantastic. I love the story. It felt familiar in a way that kept me from truly loving it.
See, for me, it just felt like sort of an extension of what he did in Antiviral, where sort of this idea of identity, but explored like in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, maybe because I just watched Antiviral before, because I knew I was going to be talking to him and covering the movie. So I was like, I hadn't seen it. And so for me, like being fresh off of watching that and then going into Possessor, like, I guess maybe the David Cronenbergianness of it kind of dissipated, but I get it because that's one of the biggest themes in like Cronenberg's, oeuvre is this idea of, technology and identity and sexuality and what does all of that mean, and humanity, and what does it mean to be human, and how do we deconstruct those ideas that we've seen time and time again in his movies. And obviously there's a lot of that in Possessor. But I think
it's funny you mentioned like what you had recently seen. The last Cronenberg movie I saw before seeing this was Existence. And I think that,
there you go.
Like if there's two movies that are going to kind of have some similarities in terms of like themes and visuals and things like that, I think it's those two. So yeah, I think Circumstance probably had something to do with it as well.
Yeah. And it's been a while since I've seen that. So, I totally get it. Anybody who says like, oh, I could see the elder Cronenberg in this movie, like for sure. But there was just something, I think, in the approach and the composition of the movie, and sort of the pacing and the visuals and just sort of, I think just the way, there was something in the way that Andrea and Christopher Abbott, who I also don't think gets enough credit for his performance in that movie, because holy hell, it's like his performance in that movie is layered in a way that I really haven't seen in quite some time. Like we talk about Freaky, where, it's basically, Vince Vaughn playing a teenage girl. Where in Possessor, you have,
oh God, yeah.
It's like, let me try
there. Who is he playing? There are times on purpose you don't know who he is.
So he's playing Andrea Riseborough inside of his body, who is then trying to play who she thinks his character is. So it's like there's an extra layer there.
That sounds like a lot of math.
There's a lot of math to this movie, which again is why I was really glad I saw it a second time, because it really, it's like burned into my DNA now. But I would really, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas and concepts here with identity that I would like to see people who are a little more qualified to take on, because I think there's some important things that are sort of being explored thematically in the movie that I've just, again, it's a little above me and my capabilities. But I think that there's some really good stuff in here that you could really go in and pull apart and dig into, as a writer in the genre world. So, but yeah, it was one of those, I saw it in January and I was like, I literally just the whole year was just waiting to see it again. And it was one of those, like they were showing it at Beyond Fest here in LA. And I know sometimes with the drive-in, like it can be a little distracting trying to see stuff at the drive-in. And so I was like, no, because I wanted to show my Bryan about, to watch the movie because I knew he was going to love it. And I wanted to wait until we could like see it at home, because I knew it was one of those movies that you really have to like focus. Because if you look away for a second because somebody's walking by with their popcorn from their car, like you're almost like 5 steps behind the story at that point. So it's a movie that really, really commands your attention, but I think it does a really good job of holding it.
And I'm very excited to see it now.
Yes.
Now, was there a difference between the Sundance version and the uncut version that was released?
See, here's the thing is I don't know. It didn't seem any different to me. Like some of the scenes seemed a little more gory, but
okay.
But when I saw it at Sundance, it was just Possessor. It wasn't Possessor uncut. So I don't know if they showed a different. I don't remember if they showed a different version at the film festival, because it was one of those, like, again, like when I see a movie, like now I'm like in the point of my life where I have to take notes on everything. And I even went back and looked at my notes when I was watching Possessor. And I really was trying to I was struggling to try to figure out, like, did they show the uncut version at Sundance or did they hold back at Sundance? Because, sometimes you get like these old people who live in Utah who want to just go to the festival and be fancy pantses. And are they, so you want to kind of hold back on them because you don't want to freak them out. But I will say the uncut version is pretty freaking gnarly.
Okay.
And I think the effects for that were also done by the same people, the same gentleman. I'm blanking on his name. I think he's under 13 Finger Effects on Twitter, but it was the same person who did Host.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So which one did you see then, Bryan?
I saw the uncut version.
You saw the uncut. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I have theories on what made it uncut, but I'm not sure.
I mean, I think it's just more gore because everything else structurally was the same.
I actually think it might have been more sexual elements they're very brief, but I can see.
No, that was in there.
We might be talking about two different things. I know what I think you're talking, but we'll talk about it afterwards. But
Okay. But yeah, as far as like the sexual stuff, it was all pretty much the same from the Sundance version. I think it's the gore. I think because because for some reason people are sort of sensitive about that. But yeah, we can discuss that offline.
Sure.
So, all right. Well, that's our basic, our two big picks from all of us. But I know that there's like a ton of other movies. So real quick, guys, we'll do round robin style. Do you have any other sort of honorable mentions that you wanted to make note of before we wrap up? Scott, how about you?
What year did The Color Out of Space come out?
Sort of 2019 and 2020, I guess.
That was actually the last new movie I saw in the theater, so that was a 2020.
All right, I'm throwing that on there. I just watched that again the other day for about the third time, I think, and it just gets better on repeat viewings. It's so great, and it has a great Nicolas Cage performance in it.
All right. Any others?
Oh, I thought if I just talked for long about one,
that would get you out of it.
That you wouldn't ask me for any others. Oh gosh, and golly, and
what was your best old movie discovery from last year? Maybe an older movie that you had never seen before. This is good.
This is good radio right here. This is good air.
This is where I'm going to put in. Let me clear my throat.
This is. Please stand by.
Right.
Let me. I don't know why I'm blank. This is what that year did to my brain. It's like just kind of mushed all the movies I watched into one big mucusy ball.
Delicious.
And you have to try to peel your way through to remember what the hell you saw.
Okay. Well, that was super helpful. How about
That's my answer. Circle around.
All right, Bryan, what about you?
I get to cheat and look at my Letterboxd list.
Good idea.
So one shout out for a TV show, and one that still kills me that they canceled this is I Am Not Okay With This. It was such a good show from so many different angles. There's definitely horror elements in there, but it's kind of it's also a coming of age drama. It's a story about grief. It's also funny. It's just a very heartfelt show that I think didn't get the due that it deserved. But I do think there's enough to that first season that it's worth watching that one season. If you haven't, just know that that's all you're going to get. In terms of old stuff that I might have caught for the first time. I think I was just on the other end of, it was January 2020 that I finally saw Bliss, which was amazing. Really enjoyed that. And just kind of digging deeper into the really.
I like how, by the way, can I just interrupt for a second? I like how we talk about old movies. You're like, well, there's this 2019 movie.
Yeah. And that's what, give me a break. Give me a second. I'm going to going back a little bit deeper.
Why do you have a movie from 2016 also?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
okay. Well, while he's letterboxing.
No.
He's going still.
No. You don't get to cut off. You had nothing.
You get nothing. You lose.
Good day, sir. Lost Highway. I did that one for Let's Scare Bryan to Death. And it's actually the first David Lynch movie I'd ever seen. Wasn't sure I was going to be able to get on board with, sometimes if there's not like a linear narrative, I can get pretty lost. But this one,
on the highway, as it would be.
Tee. And it was one that, I kind of set back and managed expectations and know that I probably wasn't going to necessarily completely understand everything going on, but just kind of let myself feel it. And it was a really good experience.
Excellent. I almost got to see that at the drive-in this fall, but the night that they did a David Lynch triple feature, Winnie ended up having one of her liver episodes, so we couldn't leave her home. But yeah, I really wanted to see that at the drive-in, but I also knew that was going to be like a 7-hour night at the drive-in too. I don't know if we could really leave the dogs that long, but that's really cool that you got to see that. Great movie, great soundtrack. Makes me wish I did drugs when I first saw it, because boy, oh boy, would that be fun.
Yeah.
So, all right. How about for you, Derek?
So one of the probably most depressing, dark, and utterly horrifying movies that I saw in 2020 was
DuckTales.
I have a feeling I know what this is going to be, I think already, but let's go there.
Well, Scott ruined it. It is DuckTales. But also another one I watched that was all of those things and more was Brian Bertino's The Dark and the Wicked.
I knew that was where you were going. I was like, It's either one of two movies. It's either Relic or The Dark and the Wicked.
Yeah,
you talk about messed up and depressing, and you're like, yes.
They've got that market cornered. Yeah, that was just utterly horrifying and kind of hard to watch, but I'm glad I did. And I got to interview Xander Berkeley about it because he kind of has a smaller role, but a very kind of a pivotal role in that one. And I just love the psychological elements of it, but also a lot of really kind of gruesome, gnarly, just effed up stuff in that one. And like the cutting board scene in particular, like I kind of knew, okay, this is going to happen, but it's still really messed me up watching that scene. And just the way that Bertino like plays with grief, and it kind of almost feels like a supernatural twist on The Strangers, like all these visitors coming to this house. It really, really got under my skin. So that was definitely one of the more memorable ones that I saw that I didn't mention on my favorites because I'm almost scared to to mention it on my favorites.
Gotcha. Any oldies that you saw?
Yes. So for the first time, I know I mentioned I watched Little Monsters.
I was going to say Little Monsters is one.
Little Monsters is one. And then another one from 1989 that I watched for the first time was Society. I'd never seen Society before.
Oh my God. Okay, guys. All right. Wait. This question is for Scott and Brian. How much would you pay to watch Derek watch Society for the first time? I would pay top dollar.
Which would be interesting because that would also be the first time I had seen it. So I haven't seen
really?
it. Yeah.
Oh my God. We need to stop right now. Go watch Society. What's wrong with you?
But I'd almost just rather watch a reaction video of Derek watching it.
I knew I should have live streamed that.
Nice.
And
put it on your OnlyFans. Yeah. Put it on your OnlyFans.
Right, yeah, exactly. This is the content that the special ones get.
He's got one video on his OnlyFans, and it's him watching Society.
That's all you need.
Yeah. So did you like it then?
Oh, I did. I felt a little icky after watching it, but I did enjoy it ultimately. And it actually had like more like bonkers humor than I expected. Like just the whole until you hit like the last 15-20 minutes, but it was very interesting. It felt kind of like watching someone's acid trip or something. It was crazy.
It's very Usnatastic is that movie is.
Going along that path, I saw Street Trash for the first time.
Nice.
Recently. I've never seen people play keep away with a man's penis before.
Well, it's the first time for everything.
Cinema.
Yes. We're very high class. No, that movie is great. I actually watched it because I was interviewing Jennifer Aspinall years and years ago. So that was the first time I ever watched Street Trash. And I was like, holy crap. I watched that the same day I watched Spookies for the first time. And let me tell you, that was a very interesting day for me. I didn't know what to think about anything anymore after
Doors were
that.
open.
Yeah, that was, I existed in a higher level of being after that day.
That's a great special effects combo though.
It is. Well, she worked on both.
Yeah.
So,
but that's a great showcase for
yeah,
special effects.
It really is, especially low budget special effects too.
Yeah.
Because neither one of those movies had, 2 nickels to rub together. So that's awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to
fly.
So, I mean, as mentioned, I was offline, of course, I was saying how I literally, my favorites list is just torturing me because I can't take things off my list. And now I keep adding things to my list. because I don't know what else to do. A little outside of the realm of horror, I think probably one of my very favorite movies of the year was Spontaneous, which if you have you seen it?
I haven't, but I really want to.
So like, I knew I was going to like this movie because it's sort of like, again, it's sort of genre adjacent comedy about teenagers who like spontaneously combust. But it really, I don't want to say too much because it's a movie that I really encourage everybody to watch because again, you talk about movies that ended up sort of being extremely timely. Spontaneous is one of those because then they take these teenagers. It just happens to this one senior class in this one high school in the world. So this isn't something that happens everywhere. So so then they have to quarantine these kids and these kids have to be taken out of their homes and studied and things like that. And it's, kids who are on the cusp of adulthood, dealing with just that pressure of, how do you transition to adulthood and all these feelings that come with it. But then also at any given moment, for no reason whatsoever, you might explode. And you don't know what that means. So you have to kind of live every moment like it's your last. But it's really funny. It's really heartfelt. I cried twice, but I left feeling filled with hope, which is really hard to pull off, I think, in a movie like that. And it's so damn good. Like it is, again, it's one of these movies I wish Paramount would have found a way to push it more because I think it really deserves it. And I've seen more and more people talking about it now and they only even released it on DVD. So it's not even on Blu-ray. But if it's a movie that you can find and you have time to check it out, I really, really recommend it. Don't sort of dismiss it as like this sort of vapid teen comedy. It's so much more than that. And it's really just really well done. Brian Duffeld directed it. He's also the person who wrote Underwater. He, of course, wrote Spontaneous. He also wrote Love and Monsters. And so he had a hell of a 2020. So that's one I really recommend.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And again, I look at my list of favorites and I'm just like, holy crap, I don't even know how to, sort of break it down. Gretel and Hansel was another movie that I absolutely loved that has really stuck with me. It just hit Amazon Prime and I think it's coming to Hulu as well. When we talk about dark and depressing, there's also Relic, which left me an emotional mess at the end. That movie just sort of pulled me apart in ways I wasn't expecting. I also think another movie that I saw that sort of got a little bit of buzz was, but again, I think it kind of came out right when everything was sort of with lockdown and we were all trying to figure out what the hell we were doing with ourselves, is a movie called Swallow, which is just absolutely incredible.
I really want to see that one. I've heard really good things about it.
It's one of those where like, I know it's actually starting to sort of win in critic circles groups. So I'm glad people are paying attention to it. So that's another one that if you really want to dig into a character's like sort of a really good character story that is very nuanced when it comes to mental health and sort of the oppression that people feel in terms of living up to others' expectations. That's a really good one. I'm also a big fan of The Wolf of Snow Hollow. That's a movie that actually I liked the first time I saw. I loved it the second time because it's very quirky. It's got very interesting pacing, like line delivery. And if you're not ready for it, it can be a little off-putting. But I think once you settle into it, it's really fantastic. So that was another one. And I just finally caught up this week with Love and Monsters, which is an absolutely adorable blast. And I loved it. And I highly recommend it. It's a movie that you can, if you're somebody who doesn't have kids, you're going to have fun with it. But if you have kids, it's going to be a really good family watch too.
Yeah, that one looks like so much fun.
Yeah, it's another one I have to get my review done for. But it has Michael Rooker in it too, which I did not realize. And he's really fun in it. He's got a little thing that he does in there, and he's very Michael Rookery. So, but yeah, last year was just like literally. I mean, when and I'm not giving away spoilers because nobody's gonna read my list anyway. But like a lot of the movies that were in my honorable mentions are like incredible movies. Like you have like La Llorona, which is not The Curse of La Llorona, but La Llorona, which is on Shudder, and it's absolutely astounding filmmaking. movies like Alone, which was, again, a movie that probably under normal circumstances would have gone completely over my radar, like off my radar, ended up being fantastic, and just really made me tense in ways like that. I think I'm still trying to unclench my butt cheeks from that movie. His House was absolutely phenomenal and just was like a gut punch, especially that third act. Shirley, which I can't even believe that came out last year. Again, talking about incredible Elizabeth Moss performances. That was fantastic. And I have a few movies that you guys mentioned in that sort of group as well. But all in all, 2020 sucked in a lot of ways, but not when it comes to horror.
Yeah, horror always tends to come through.
It does. Although I will tell you, there were some years early on in my career when I had to put together like my favorites or my top 10 list of the year. And it was like, pulling teeth sometimes. You're like, I guess this one will go on there.
Convince yourself. I did like this, damn it.
Yeah. So, I think
you were starting during some lean years.
Yeah, I did. When you start up doing this stuff around 2007, like, it's
the only thing worse would be doing coverage in 93.
Don't talk about the 90s. Don't you dare.
Stop it, Scott.
Dissing the 90s.
You literally just did.
I'm just saying that if you were doing press coverage in 93 for horror, you're scrounging because.
Are we though? Because I just Googled it because I'm fast. So not only do you have Brian Usna doing Return of the Living Dead 3, which is pretty fun. Jason Goes to Hell, which is probably one of my favorite of the later sequels. I know I'm in the very minority on that, and I'm cool with that.
You're not making a great case for me right now.
No, but
and I want to be on your side. So
no,
badly.
but you also have Leprechaun. You have Body Melt. You have Kronos, the Dark Half, Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Maniac Cop 3. All right. But there's some pretty strong ones. Now I'm going to make this. They're going to be your. That's going to be your assignment this year, Scott, is that you're going to have to write about horror from 1993.
An assignment. Oh boy, Teach, am I motivated?
I mean, come on. It's the year that gave us Matinee. Like, you can't be so bad at 93.
I'm not mad. I just picked that arbitrarily. I'm not mad at 93.
What do you have against Untamed Heart, damn it? Was Army of Darkness 92 or 93?
I want to say that was 93. And Needful Things was 93, and that was a damn good movie.
Yeah, I like Needful Things.
3,000 words on ticks. For you to say that.
I love ticks, but 3,000?
Hey, if I can do 1,500 words on Hollywood chainsaw hookers, someone can do 3,000 on ticks.
And there you go. And let's not forget Hocus Pocus.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. I still haven't watched it. I have it here in the wrapper still.
Well, I mean.
But then also there's the Tommy Knockers.
Oh, my God. That was awful.
Oh, poor Jimmy Smits.
Oh, poor everybody in that movie.
Poor Marg Helgenberger.
I only remember the dad from Some Kind of Wonderful being in it, John Ashton, who was like one of my favorite 80s actors.
Oh, that's the guy from Beverly Hills Cop, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. So anyway, well, now that we've just decided that Scott doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to 90s horror.
As always.
I feel like that's the perfect way to wrap up our discussion on 2020 horror. Right? I'm making it work.
Absolutely.
I'm making it work. Yes. So anyway, for those of you listening at home, thank you so much once again for tuning into Corpse Club. Happy 2021. For more information on Corpse Club, you can go over to our website and check us out over at corpseclub.com for all your daily news, reviews, and interviews and fun things like that. Please be sure to head over to dailydead.com for that. You can follow us over on Twitter at either Daily Dead News or at Corpse Club. Let us know what you think. Let us know what some of your favorites from 2020 are. Huge thank you to our editor, Brian, for gussying up the old episodes every week. And I think that's pretty much it. So until next time, everybody, stay scary.